So brilliant. Angus, Tomas, thanks for joining me today. This is really exciting.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking.
Thank you.
I think so. The idea with this session is that we are going to talk about the ways that you guys are applying specific different, tech-driven approaches to water management specifically. The area of connecting nature that I've very much focused on is within the area of nature-based enterprises. What do the enterprises look like that have a more tech-driven approach to nature-based solutions? I call this idea the Internet of Nature. How we can use technologies, specifically emerging technologies, newer technologies, to not only better monitor and better manage our urban ecosystems and all of that entails, but also actually better reconnect people to these urban ecosystems as well, which I think is kind of an interesting way to use technology, something that might seem a little bit contradictory to people, but can actually be quite effective. So maybe to kick us off, Angus, would you like to introduce yourself and your enterprise?
Yeah, okay. I'm Angus Middleton from the Isle of Wight, as I just said. I spent my 20s exploring the world, my 30s exploring pollution, and my 40s exploring nature-based solutions, amongst other things. So that's kind of my background in a dash. And that's culminated with me starting Viridian Logic, which is the business that I now run. And I guess we do a lot of planning, modeling of nature-based solutions, all sorts. But our real expertise, our really sort of unique point is around water. So that it is finding the best things to do and best locations, so you get best bang for buck, basically. So yeah, the very most effective things to do, either in whole landscapes, thousands of square kilometers, or right down to street scales. Where should we put this pocket park or this small little rain garden? And we can slot everything else in. We can just quantify stuff, and it is a very tech-driven thing. A lot of statistical modeling, and it's trying to fill a gap that's been there around this idea of knowing the best places to do stuff and give options. Give people the power to make their own decisions, but an informed decision. So that is what we're aiming to do at the moment.
Right, that's brilliant. So quite at a fine scale in terms of granularity. So use the doorbell.
Yeah, we try and model at about 5 sort of meter pixels. So 5 by 5, if we're looking at maybe 1,000, 2,000 square kilometers, and then they're insistent anyway. And then if we've got the topographic data, we can get down to about 1 meter. But below that, it starts not to make sense because a lot of the natural solutions have to be bigger than that anyway. If you're planting a tree, going down to 5 centimeters is really ridiculous.
Right. The context has got to make sense for what we're trying to intervene with.
Absolutely.
Very cool. I want to get into that a little bit later, but Tomas, before we go on, would you mind introducing yourself and your enterprise?
Yeah, not at all. Thanks for having us on stage. I am building a consulting enterprise, Gamesh, and what Gamesh does is making software and intellectual assets available and packaging it into simple services that help anyone to build the best wetlands in the world. So I'm founder and chief consultant at Gamesh, and the idea here is to help people who have projects related to water quality or quantity to implement the right project regardless of their experience.
Right. So the focus is really on wetlands. So out of all of the different nature-based solutions that I feel like we have a menu to choose from, why the focus on wetlands for you?
Yeah, exactly. So it goes back a long time, like 10 years when I was...
it always does.
Yeah, and at that time I was focusing on natural wetlands, and there was one day a very thick book of Scott Wallace landing in my hand, and I'm a kind of guy who likes nature and computation, and I opened this book, and there was a lot of equation description of different wetlands for improving water quality, and I was thinking like, yeah, there is a lot of things to synthesize here.
Right. I like this, what you said about having this simultaneous love for nature and computation, because that's really what, Internet of Nature and using smart tech for nature-based solutions is all about. So tell me a little bit more about that. Why that's such a love affair for you?
Oh, I think it's an absolute a game changer for what is possible for wetlands to the last 20 years of technology. So wetlands actually have a long way to go. They are more than 50, 60, 70 years ago than it was started, and with the recent technology development, it was new ways in research, and hopefully that will now go a bit into the practice too. So I love the idea to discover, to also do the research part, and then to really do effort to valorize things.
It's kind of, yeah. Go ahead, Angus.
Can I jump in, because this is really, really interesting for me as well. So how specific can you get with kind of the plants to use and sort of how to orientate the wetlands and that kind of stuff, how to construct them, and also, do you do floating constructed wetlands?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So for plants, I would say I'm not the guy who, well, I can help to select plants, but like the computation is more to like scale the wetland and decide about the materials, how to operate it, and it's possible to join different types of wetland for different sort of pollution, because pollution can be very diverse. So there is a very diverse population of wetlands we can select from. Then the idea here is to be specific for a specific location when advising how to solve the problem and collect the data accordingly.
Tomas, are you using any kind of sensor technology when you've constructed these wetlands as kind of to jump on this, learn by doing approach and have every kind of iterative design, right? Have every design be better than the last?
Mm-hmm. So for the moment, I work as a consultant, so I don't have a capacity to do the monitoring myself. However, the idea is to join the process early on and to plan the monitoring so that the data is possible to use for modeling and the software, and then generate the report in that way. So, but it's a good point. Like in case of sensors, there is a big development, and sensors become cheaper. So there are different tools to choose from according to the site.
Definitely. I think we're still very much kind of at the brink of where the technology is just coming up and slowly becoming more affordable and more accessible as well, so that hopefully we can start to use it at a much larger scale.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, like, Angus, if I may also to
please
address the question.
Absolutely.
Because I checked the introduction video that you have, and I really liked it. So for me, it's the same question. It's like you use some sensors and data to your.
Yeah, I mean, we the model. So I said, just for people listening to here, we have created this model called Hydrologists, which is all about water. So this is that's sort of our USP, where it properly understands what to do, where to get best bang for buck to solve water problems using nature at landscape or street or city or whatever scale we're looking at. Anyway, so a little bit of background there, everyone. So generally we tend to use a lot of open source data for two reasons. One, if we do a lot of work for charities and they don't want to spend money particularly, and secondly, licensing problems. It's just a nightmare where we're sharing a lot of this stuff. A lot of our outputs are designed so that people have an awful lot of options. We can show them the best thing to do, but also the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth best things to do to solve the specific problems, which means it's great for stakeholder consultations. And that again means it's really tricky with licenses if you have to buy in data. So we data or stuff that has license problems. With sensors, it's great when we can get to that sort of granularity and put sensors out there. We focus very much on being pragmatic. So our first question is always, what is the least we need to do to get to the answers the client wants? You know, because that's the quickest, cheapest, often easiest for everyone involved way of getting there. And that's usually, and it can be an iterative process. So often it's do the rough stuff first, get a first answer out there, people can look at it, discuss it, come up with what they want to do and their decisions, and then we can go out and refine things. And at that stage, often it's more going on the ground, putting sensors out, actually measuring stuff. So kind of, I think it's a yes and no answer. But I totally agree, as sensors get better and cheaper, and it's LoRa networks and that kind of stuff to harness that data, or even some of the sort of the Vodafone networks, it's becoming a lot more possible within budget and within the timescales. Yeah.
I like your realistic approach to using sensors, Angus, because I think a lot of the time, you know, we kind of maybe lead with a little bit too much techno-optimism. We get very excited about the potential that technology has, and, you know, then we start to just want to put it everywhere. And indeed, we have to take a step back, look at the problem, look at the problem the client wants to fix, and indeed think about the smartest and most effective way to get there is not necessarily by putting a sensor everywhere. So I think that's a good kind of realistic dose of what we need to do in this situation. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I completely agree. And so often I see because we're doing quite a lot of high tech modeling, or if we get involved with lots of other modelers, and you know, time and time again, I see people just getting lost in the models, you know, with this joy of the tech and getting down to absolute specifics and doing some amazing modeling work, you know, that I could never do. But it's coming up with stuff that's totally useless. Right. You know, it's so expensive, takes so long, but, you know, and it's not actually doing what's needed.
Sure. Yeah.
And if we're going to mainstream, which I think this kind of conference is all about, if we're going to get this rolled out, we can't do that. It's too indulgent.
No, absolutely. I just want to take a quick moment and say hello to the 39 of you that have joined us in this session in the last couple of minutes. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions for Angus or Tomas, please pop them in the chat and we will get to them. So thank you for coming and joining us. Maybe just quickly for some of you latecomers, we've got Angus Middleton with us, who founded Viridian Logic, focused on using a bunch of different modeling tools to assess, you know, where we can put the best nature-based solution where. It always reminds me of that old adage that we have in urban forestry, you know, right tree in the right place. And then we've got Tomas joining us, and it's Gamish. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's Gamesh.
Gamesh,
Yes.
With the Gamesh Digital Wetland, which is very much focused on, again, using a very tech-driven approach, but then to designing and implementing wetlands. So thank you to Aaron, Stephen, and Dennis that have all joined us, and we're spreading from the UK to India. So thank you for joining us. That is the beautiful thing about these virtual conferences. So to get back to it, I'm very curious, a question to the both of you. What has been the biggest misconception that you guys have run into when it comes to applying your tech? This might be in conversations with clients or with colleagues or practitioners on the ground. You know, a tech-driven approach is not always met with applause and excitement. So I'm curious if you have ever had any misconceptions that have really stood out to you.
Thomas, do you want to kick off?
So for my case, this would be the idea that it's us who do all the project from the start to the implementation, because actually what we do is consultancy. And so we have like 3 stages typically in a wetland project that are necessary to implement a wetland based on our approach. And the first is monitoring. So it's already, as said, we would like to move a bit into implementing the monitoring too, to go on with the whole process. But practically, my little experience with this, and this is based on a discussion with the municipality, regional responsible. Actually, it might be already a problem. Like they like wetlands, they like, and you know, they have the water problem. But how to do the monitoring to build something, to come up in the end with something that will be useful. Right. And so the second step is the modeling and the report, creating reports. So this is our main focus. And the third thing again is then and this is a misconception, that we do or organize the engineering and construction. So we can be involved in engineering through the communication toward the engineering office. So helping the communication, for example, between the municipality and the engineering office. And at the engineering office side, of course, they already have a report. So there to like assure quality assurance because there are like very experienced engineering offices, of course, who build a lot of wetlands. So there to because wetlands look simple, but they can be very, very tricky, and there are points.
I bet.
Yeah, there are like little things that are crucial, and just to highlight, you know, like, okay, just this is very important, and then just to pay attention. So it's like a quality assurance. So yeah. So we don't do all the things, and this is certainly important to make it clear.
Right. Yeah. So being very clear about what the technology can and cannot do.
Yes.
Angus, how about you? Any misconceptions when it comes to all that modeling talk?
I think the biggest misconception it isn't so much about what we do, is about what has been done before. So the misconception is that the standard ways of placing NBS for water actually work, and they really don't. So pretty much everyone else, and what's been done to date, all the big engineering companies that do this kind of stuff, just use GIS, so which is map overlay. So looking at maps of characteristics of the landscape. So is it a steep slope with clay soils and very little vegetation? Yes, the water runs off it really quickly. And that sort of, from standard traditional points of view, that's a brilliant place to put trees or bushes, you know, any sort of NBS to slow that water down and hold on that slope. But the problem with this kind of map overlay stuff that again, you know, it is the standard, is that it doesn't understand flows and connectivity across landscapes. So it doesn't understand how each bit of the landscape interacts with all the others. So if we think of the example of this clay slope, if there's a marsh, a nice wetland already existing between that slope and the river, then doing stuff on that slope won't make much difference to what gets in the river, because that wetland's already sopping it all up. So it's not going to make much of an impact on flooding. And maybe it'll make a nice forest, but it's not going to really do any, you know, this flooding, if that's what you're trying to solve. So because what the outputs from our modeling are quite simple maps, often heat maps, or sort of specifying what to do where, and giving all these options of what's better or worse. It seems quite simple. You know, the whole idea is what we do is it should be simple for people to understand and apply. So it's trying to get this message across that actually our modeling is very complex. It's very statistical, sort of a big analysis of lots of data over the landscape. And it really is understanding all of these connections across the landscape, all of these flows, how every single piece of the landscape is influencing every other piece of the landscape. And it's fitting that all together to work out exactly what will happen if you change the landscape in different places. You know, what's the best thing to do, and where is it to do? So it's trying to get that message across that actually what we do is very different. It just looks quite similar because we're trying to make it very simple to understand and to apply. And I think that's the biggest hurdle.
Is there, so would you say there's kind of this process of, you know, when you go to a new client or, you know, meet someone new for the first time, there's almost kind of this process of having to help them unlearn a lot of what they might know to be true about, you know, having certain NBS interventions?
Yeah, I think so. Because that's like, well, last time we did it this way, and it was, you know, we came up with these wonderful forests, and it's stopped flooding by 4% in a 1 in 20 year event, and it's like, so well, you know, the last time we did one, it was stopping it by 28%, because we put the right things in the right place. And it's some people get it immediately and go, oh yeah, obvious, duh, why didn't I think of that before? And others just really struggle, and it's not always the people you expect who would be one or the other.
Sure. I think one of the things that kind of leads me perfectly to my next question, which is about, when we go about applying kind of these new technologies, it's not just that you have to do certain convincing when it comes to the outcomes of the project, but also the application of the technique of the technology itself, which may be new to a lot of clients. So how did the both of you go about doing your business development? What does that process look like for the both of you?
Well, for us, it's just an awful lot of legwork and phone work, and just telling people, going into projects, finding out what's going on, talking to those in charge, and trying to get involved. It was just slog, and for the first year or two, because we're going back 4 years now, so the first couple of years, we were a lot more bleeding edge than I'd hoped. I thought we were going to be cutting edge, but we weren't. We're a bit ahead of that. So yeah, it took a while to, first of all, for people to understand what we were doing. And then quite a lot of, especially the charities and national parks and stuff, were like, great, we absolutely want to use this as soon as we get funding. And then it was that sort of year or 2 year funding cycle and stuff. So and now we've done some, and it's snowballing, and people are coming to us and stuff. It's really, it feels like that door suddenly someone's opened it, and we're kind of falling flat on our noses, but in a very good way.
Yeah.
So what? Sorry, Tomas, go ahead.
Yeah, it's good to hear that the doors are opening. So just to add, in our case, the development is like, because I come from research. So for me, and I have been active in different countries. So for me, the development is still strongly like packaging ideas and knowledge and software from what was generated in practically the last 10 years. And meanwhile, because we are active like in Hungary, Austria, France. So just to have the obtain the right attitudes and knowledge on the market, like what is really needed, what of what we package is really useful, is it really useful, is it now ready to be picked up by municipalities or stakeholders who need it. Right.
So what would be, if we have any aspiring nature-based enterprise entrepreneurs in our midst here, what would be your advice to them? Persevere. Get
rich before starting a nature-based enterprise. I think typical business advice: do your research, find niches. If you can do stuff locally, brilliant, it helps. You don't have to go so far. People feel connected. It's all about people, let's face it. Although we're working with nature and with tech, actually it's all about people. So it's get the easy wins, do the research, find out where you can fit in, play to your strengths. Don't just go off in a completely new tangent you know nothing about. It's typical business stuff.
I totally agree with you, Angus, and I think it's like how long you can stay initially on your feet, and it feels like nature-based solutions are one of these products or markets where you can calculate with a long time for each project. So even if something starts to evolve, and you are certain that can be like a long time until the end of the project. So this is standing solidly. It's really important to start.
No, absolutely. What's something? I mean, you guys have both been working on your enterprises for a number of years now. What's something that if you go back to the beginning, something that you might do differently?
Thomas, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, so what I certainly would do differently is I would start the development of our own modeling tools earlier. So initially we picked up from research, and we used two tools, and now we have the third tool. And this is developed in-house, but this is something that I would have started earlier, because there are so many uses of even if it's a small tool, from education, training, and if the tool is oriented towards design. So each tool has possibility of multiple uses. So to me, it's quite
Sure.
important to have more tools. And the other thing that it allows is to right now we have 3 tools. It allows to join the tools, and joining the tools means like being very specific and matching the needs for water quality. So
right. Early development on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
How about you, Angus?
Yeah, I think for me, on the business side,
Yeah.
it would be if you can, and you've got the luxury of practicing grant applications. I mean, it sounds really mundane, but there's a lot of funding out there for this sort of thing, but it's quite competitive, and there's a definite sort of way of filling these things out that are more successful than others. And often it's not about what you're doing, it's about how you fill the forms in. So if you have the luxury of being able to spend 6 months sort of just researching that, practicing, getting better at filling in grant applications, it will make your life a lot easier when you kick off.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. That's not talked about enough. Indeed, it's less about, you know, how innovative it is what you're doing, and more about how you're able to put that innovation into words. So, and it's great for grant applications to practice, but it also kind of helps you really refine your messaging, what your kind of your core offering is, who you're trying to target. So it's got a lot of kind of other benefits rather than only getting the grant.
Yeah, that's true.
So we've actually got our first audience question coming in from Maria. Thank you, Maria, for sending that in. Please, any of you that might have, that are watching that might have questions, please don't forget to drop them in the chat. So Maria says, Dear Angus, if there can be a possibility to make a dashboard from your developed models to select and show it publicly, which kind of nature-based solution on different landscape would be suited? So I guess she's asking, is there a possibility to have a dashboard where you're really able to visualize these models and show it to the public?
Yes, we kind of designed Hydrologists to become a sort of an online, web-enabled, possibly desktop app type model. At the moment, it is consultancy, so we create these GIS maps that clients can then use themselves on things like QGIS. So this normal GIS mapping software. But we do want to get to the point where it will be a dashboard that people can use it itself. It's just that development pathway again. You know, if I'd been better at filling in funding applications at the beginning, we'd have probably been there by now. But we weren't. We didn't have the funding to go all the way to that, which is, you know, it's quite an undertaking. So, yeah, great question. We will hopefully get there in the not too distant future. So yeah, lovely. Very happy to have a chat with you offline or in the booth later. Yeah, it'd be lovely to know what you're trying to achieve yourselves and yourself and what you do, and yeah, just chat about it. It'd be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Maria also has a question for Tomas. She says, very interesting work on wetlands. Can you please elaborate about some projects on wetlands, for example, on conservation or rewatering the dry wetlands? Please provide some examples of your work. Conservation
and rewatering, like, it's not directly what we target conservation, but one example of work for with conservation purposes, and I think this is a very European thing. It's from south of Lyon. It's from France, and it's related to one combined sewer overflow. So the example was that the municipality had this overflow, and you know, so for those, yeah, it's not very evident what combined sewer overflows are, but they are actually when it rains and there is a lot of water in the sewer, that, by the way, collects not only stormwater in the case of combined sewers, but also municipal wastewater. So if there is a big rain, it's common practice that the excess water lands into natural streams and rivers without any treatment. And we talk about massive numbers in Europe. Only in 2019 and in the UK, there was a survey that it is estimated that around 200,000 combined sewer overflows happened alone in the UK. So in this project, the idea was to protect the stream. so the overflow point was known. There is water coming out. There was some level of monitoring of water quality, which was just good enough. And there was a good monitoring data available for hydraulics. And based on this, we were able to scale a wetland that has a special storage basin and give evidence before the construction through modeling, like okay, so more or less these are the numbers that you could expect from the wetland, and this is the size of the area that you will need as land purchase to purchase the wetland. These are more or less the costs. And as a protection example, we could compare the outflow quality and quantity and limit it, so we protect the stream. So if we want to transfer this into general conservation of natural wetlands, it could be a different source of water, but again, combined sewer overflow is very typical, and to see the impact possible, the possible improvement for wildlife or other uses before the project actually finishes or even starts.
Right. On that note, in terms of, Maria's back. Actually, she's followed up. So let's continue on Maria's questions here just for a second, because she just asked what kind of simulation or modeling software are you using for these projects? Actually, that's a question of both of you. So let's address that one first.
Mm-hmm. So we have 2/3 of our software is in-house. So one is self-development. There is another tool which reaches back long ago, but practically it's a commonly available tool with an in-house calibration for a specific type of wetland. And there is then a third tool which is with research. It's used in research, and so it's specifically for combined sewer overflow. But again, we like to see the data, and then it's and the needs on the end, like what improvement is expected from the water, and then it's possible to select from the three tools those
Right.
like each can represent a different sort of constructed wetland, because there are like different types with different purpose. And
Sure, the
and
context is important. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Angus?
Yeah, well, I guess there's two things. For all the water stuff we created our own model called Hydrologists. So that's a mixture of GIS and hydrology kind of spliced together. It's sort of based off the natural capital projects, RIOS and INVEST models. They're sort of the RIOS one is kind of bit of an engine in our Hydrologists. And then we sort of changed it and refocused it and put some scaffolding around it and kind of open source quite a lot of that back to the natural capital project. So that's kind of we've created ourselves, and sometimes we splice that in with other hydraulic modeling or nutrient modeling to try and quantify the benefits and things. But that's the hydrologist is very good at identifying what to do where and ranking and prioritizing, and we can do some quantification with it, and then we use other models when we need to. And then, but if everything else, for all the carbons, recreations, health, pollination, all that kind of stuff, we tend to use kind of just the latest best practice from published works using GIS kind of modeling techniques.
Yeah. I think kind of a key lesson for me here is that you don't necessarily need to have everything in-house or develop everything yourself. There's a lot of kind of fusion possible to kind of come up with the optimal methodology that works for you, and combining a lot of both enterprise tools, commercial tools, and open source tools as well. Going back a little bit less content-based and more into the business side of things, there's been a number of really great questions that have come in regarding funding of the enterprises. Mark had a great question about, he asked, can you foresee a time when your companies can survive/thrive without grant funding? For example, or in other words, as a fully commercial operation, are there enough paying customers out there?
Well, we've been fully commercial for 4 years. We had a little bit of grant funding to start with, but never enough to pay for everything we do.
Right.
Completely. So we've been pretty much commercially funded since the word go, and we've had almost no grant funding after our first year. So yeah, we've been.
And can I ask, Angus, how the effect of COVID was on your operations?
Yeah, for us it was bad. A lot of because we're all about actually practically solving problems. Our modeling at big scale can be very useful for policy and stuff, but it's really designed to help people decide really what to do on the ground. And a lot of those projects were put back. We'd sort of put back a year or 2 years because people just couldn't get together and do this stuff. And I think there was a time where we didn't have any income for about 8 months, just because just no projects were coming forward. For us, that was tough.
Yeah, no, I bet. I think that's for anybody that works with municipalities, myself included. It's really tough because all of a sudden they're obviously their primary focus is public health. So it's hard for them to think about anything else. How about you, Tomas? Grant funding versus commercial, the impact of COVID. Tell us.
Yeah, so I am in a lucky position that I work as an entrepreneur and consultant. So I am responsible only for three things: the work, of course, that we deliver, but only for two other things. And one is the know-how and to manage the intellectual assets, because that I see as the core for the future to work with. And of course, the third is like myself. So for me, the case is I don't have to have continuously the income yet, because the responsibilities are scaled accordingly. So for me, it's to obtain more and more projects with time and start the growth track. So I would say I'm somewhere where I'm starting to be confident with the offer and the product and how to explain it in how to present it the right way for people who are not who are interested in nature-based solutions, that not necessarily know what to expect or how to implement them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's kind of critical, especially in trying times like we've had the past year and a half, to remain that kind of flexibility. I think has definitely been in your favor. I wanted to follow up because I think it's a great question. Mark had asked for Angus, who has been fully commercially funded for the last 4 years, what are some lessons, whether that's from your business model or from a certain operational perspective that others might be able to learn from? Because grant funding is great for the beginning, a little bit of seed funding, but indeed a large part, you'll also have to show this on your grant application, of course, is, well, how will you survive without the grant? And is the market ready for something like this, which clearly you've proven it has. So what can we learn from you?
Yeah, well, thanks Mark, for your support on that. It does come down to the typical business kind of angles, which are always talked about. So it is do the research first. Make sure before you jump that you have enough runway. Ideally, get some clients first. Get some people interested before you make the jump and before you have to support yourself. And start using that runway. See what's out there. See what support you can get. Keep your overheads to a minimum. Be lean. Pivot. So change things. Be fluid, but have a really good idea of what you're trying to achieve. And as Nadine was saying, get this message right. Practice that message. Get it so you can tell people what you're doing, why it's brilliant, why they need it, and that will really speed things along. But it is in some ways it is standard business practice. All the things that are constantly talked about entrepreneurial starting businesses and stuff, as well as that overlay of the technical stuff and the actual making sure it works. People want it works for nature, it works for people.
Yeah, Yeah, no, absolutely. That beautifully builds on a point that Siobhan just made in the chat, that there's a lot more that we can learn from other businesses that have been focused on NBS, and have successfully financed and scaled. She mentioned there's a couple of great workshops tomorrow on different approaches to financing and scaling nature-based solutions, from building associate networks to taking on impact investment. So that's great. You can check those out tomorrow. So just to round us off here, as we're nearing the end of our session, I would love to ask the both of you, first off, where can people connect with you online? Because I think there's a lot more great questions here and a lot more, hopefully, business opportunities here. Who knows? So maybe just each of you, what's the best way to find you online?
Okay, I'll go. In the booth to start with, and over the next couple of days. Then it's LinkedIn, just Angus Middleton. There's @ViridianLogic on Twitter, or there's our website, viridianlogic.com, and Viridian is eyes, VIRIDIAN, logic.
Perfect.
We have our
Leon
website.
has put it in the chat. Thank you, Leon. Intimus?
Yeah, we have our website, gamesh.com. We try to run an informative campaign of what we do. So it's charged with video and brochure material. So one way to connect is through the website, or what people can do is to reach out on LinkedIn. So it's Tamás Gábor Palfi, is written in the box.
It's on his name tag.
Yes.
Perfect. That's great. So please, all of you that are watching, and perhaps those of you that had questions that we weren't able to get to in the short time that we had with both Angus and Tomas, please reach out to them, find them in the booth, or find them later on LinkedIn or their email. And the very last question that I want to ask both of you is, where do we go from here? What is your vision for your enterprise and sustainable cities in, let's say, 10 years from now?
No, for me, this is like growing out from being one person into likely an SME, and to base the services to stay close to research, but with the idea to try to support people in as many countries as possible. And the second thing is to be stronger at each part, from the monitoring to the modeling, and to helping the engineering, so to grow stronger with the
full service
everywhere.
Right. Brilliant.
And my answer fits with Siobhan and Mark, actually. It's financing, I think, is the key here. To really mainstream, get NBS out at scale, we need to get financing in, and we are working on a couple of projects on this in the UK. Sort of the hydrologists especially, but some of our other modeling is kind of designed to optimize, give lots of options, but to quantify as well, and then sort of estimate risk, give an idea of what's the risk of a project having to spend more money or have less returns on what it's doing. Sure. And the whole point of that is to feed into this idea of investment. So large-scale commercial investment, that if we apply our models to different projects, we can aggregate them together, get major investment into these multiple projects, and try and actually get this happening quickly, pragmatically, at scale, and investable. And that's kind of what we're working on. I think that's the future, or part of the future.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate both of your guys' not only tech-driven approach, but also just very business-minded approach to how you run both of these enterprises. And I think that's really key in indeed taking that next step and making nature-based solutions a lot more mainstream, which is, of course, why we're all here today and tomorrow. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. This was a lovely, truly a lovely conversation and discussion. And I really appreciate it. So thank you to all of you. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll see you all very soon.
Oh, thank you, Nina. Thank you, everyone listening. It's been good fun.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Ciao.